The day my husband threw me and our 10-day-old twin daughters out into a snowstorm, I stopped believing that the people who hurt you the most are strangers. Sometimes they're the ones who once promised to protect you forever. I had barely recovered from a traumatic delivery when my mother-in-law insisted on helping with the babies by moving into our house. Within hours, she criticized everything I did. I held the babies wrong. I fed them wrong. I dressed them wrong. Every mistake, real or imagined, became another reason to tell my husband, Daniel, that I wasn't fit to be a mother. At first, he defended me, but little by little I watched him disappear beneath her influence until it felt like I was living with two people who secretly wanted me gone. 10 days after giving birth, I woke up with a fever. My doctor suspected a postpartum infection and told me to rest, but Daniel's mother announced that I was pretending to be sick to avoid responsibility. That evening, she deliberately dropped one of the baby's bottles on the kitchen floor, then screamed that I had endangered her grandchildren by leaving broken glass where they slept. Daniel came running downstairs before I could even explain. His mother burst into fake tears, claiming she'd been protecting the twins while I sat doing nothing. I looked straight at my husband and begged him to believe me. Instead, he avoided my eyes. "Mom has sacrificed everything for us," he said quietly. "Why would she lie?" I felt my heart crack. Before I could answer, his mother pointed toward the front door and shouted, "Take your babies and get out. If you want to act like their mother, raise them somewhere else." I waited for Daniel to stop her. He didn't. He walked upstairs, returned with 2 diaper bags, placed them beside the front door, and opened it. Snow blew into the hallway as freezing air filled the house. "Maybe a few days apart will calm everyone down," he said, refusing to look at me. I stood there in complete disbelief, holding one newborn against my chest while fastening the second into a carrier with shaking hands. "Daniel," I whispered, "they're 10 days old." He closed his eyes for a second before saying the words I'll never forget. "Leave." I stepped outside into the freezing night with my daughters wrapped in blankets, while the front door slammed behind us. My phone battery was nearly dead, my wallet was still inside, and every nearby hotel was fully booked because of a holiday snowstorm. I honestly didn't know where my babies and I would sleep. Then, as I reached the sidewalk, a black SUV slowly pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, revealing an older woman I had never seen before. She looked at my twins, then at me, and quietly asked, "Are you Amelia?" I nodded cautiously. She took a deep breath before saying the one sentence that made every hair on my body stand up. "Your grandmother told me to find you if your husband ever chose his mother over you." I stood frozen beside the road, convinced the older woman had mistaken me for someone else, but then she reached into her purse and handed me a faded envelope with my grandmother's handwriting across the front. My knees nearly gave out. My grandmother had died 6 years earlier, and before she passed away, she always warned me that the hardest test of a marriage comes when someone asks your husband to choose. At the time, I thought she was simply giving grandmotherly advice. I never imagined she had planned for the possibility that I might someday need saving. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter and a key. The letter explained that years before her death, she had quietly purchased a beautiful lakeside house and placed it in a family trust under my name, instructing her longtime friend, Eleanor, to give it to me only if I ever found myself abandoned with nowhere safe to go. "A home should never depend on another person's kindness," the letter read. Tears blurred my vision as Eleanor drove my daughters and me to the property. It wasn't a tiny cabin like I'd imagined. It was a stunning, fully furnished home overlooking a frozen lake, complete with a stocked nursery, groceries, warm clothes, and even baby formula. My grandmother had prepared for a future emergency I prayed would never happen. 9 days later, Daniel finally called. His voice no longer sounded confident. "Mom's gone," he whispered. I frowned. "What do you mean?" He admitted that after forcing me out, his mother had emptied their joint accounts, transferred money into her own name using the access he'd given her years earlier, and disappeared with nearly everything he owned. Worse, investigators had contacted him because she had secretly forged his signature on several financial documents while handling his paperwork. The woman he trusted over his wife had betrayed him without hesitation. 2 days later, he appeared at the lakeside house, exhausted and carrying flowers. The woman he trusted over his wife had betrayed him without hesitation. 2 days later, he appeared at the lakeside house, exhausted and carrying flowers. "I made the biggest mistake of my life," he said through tears. "Please come home." I looked at the man who had watched his 10-day-old daughters leave in a snowstorm without stopping us. "Home?" I asked quietly. "The home where you opened the door and told us to leave?" He lowered his head, unable to answer. Just then, a sheriff's vehicle pulled into the driveway. Daniel looked terrified until the deputy explained he wasn't there for him. Eleanor had reported my mother-in-law's financial crimes weeks earlier after discovering suspicious transactions connected to my late grandmother's estate. Investigators had finally located her attempting to leave the country with forged documents and stolen funds. Within months, she was convicted of fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation. During the custody hearing, the judge reviewed security footage from our home's front door camera showing Daniel silently placing the diaper bags outside while I stood crying with our newborn twins in the snow. The courtroom became so quiet that even Daniel couldn't watch the screen. The judge awarded me primary custody and looked directly at him before saying, "Children deserve parents who protect them, not parents who surrender them." Daniel never argued. As I walked out of the courthouse holding my daughters, he quietly whispered, "I lost everything because I chose the wrong person." I turned back one final time and answered, "No, Daniel. You lost everything the moment you forgot who had chosen you first." Months later, I watched my daughters take their first steps across the wooden floor of the home my grandmother had secretly saved for us. In the end, the greatest inheritance she left me wasn't a house. It was the wisdom to build my future on people who prove their love through their actions, not their promises.